Hey there guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to see if the iPad 6th generation is worth it in 2021. Alright, so just to give you a couple specs on this iPad here, so the iPad 6th generation came out back in 2018, came in 3 different colors, so it came in either silver, gold, or space gray, and that is what I have here today. It did come in 2 different storage capacities, so you would either have 32 gigs or 128 gigs, came in either a Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi and cellular variant. Does have a 9.7-inch LED IPS display with a resolution of 2048 by 1536 at 264 pixels per inch. Does support the Apple Pencil, has an A10 Fusion chip, embedded M10 coprocessor, and does have 2 gigs of RAM. So on the front here we do have a 1.2 megapixel camera, and on around back we have an 8 megapixel camera that does 1080p HD video recording. Does offer slow-mo as well. It does support Wi-Fi 802.11a, b, g, n, and AC, as well as Bluetooth 4.2. For our battery, it does have a 32.4 watt-hour battery, and of course Apple does promise 10 hours of browsing with it, and of course it came with iOS 12 when it was released. Now just to speak on the design of this iPad, so this is very reminiscent of the iPad Air and iPad Air 2 from 2013 and 2014. Now what you'll see on the front here is we do have our 9.7-inch display, flanked by pretty large bezels, so on the top here and on the bottom we have the largest bezels, so we do have our FaceTime camera as well as our ambient light sensor up top, and we do have our home button with Touch ID right here at the bottom. One thing that's different from the iPad Air and Air 2 is that it does have a matte finish around the edge here. So it does have a little beveled edge around the entire perimeter of the iPad, and instead of it being shiny like those 2 models, it is matte color. So you can kind of tell the difference between the 2 from there. So as we can see on this side, it is completely blank here. It does have a tapered off edge with these rounded corners, and of course it is very, very thin. On the top here, you can see we have our power key. We do have a microphone right here, as well as a 3.5mm headset jack. On the opposite side here, we do have our volume keys. So it's slightly recessed with these kind of pill style buttons right there. And then down here, it is just completely blank. If you did have a cellular model, you would have a SIM card tray right here at the left side. And at the bottom you can see right here we do have our lightning port right here, as well as our speakers, which are stereo speakers right here. Now around back here you can see we do have another microphone right here. We do have our 8 megapixel camera, no flash or anything like that, and no ring or anything special right there. We do have our Apple logo right in the center, as well as iPad branding, as well as model information right there below it. So of course, this being an iPad, it does have iPad OS, and it did come with iOS 12, but it is currently on iPad OS 14.4. This one is not. This one hasn't been updated, but it is currently up to date, so you can get this on the latest release. Now, of course, that includes some different stuff you can do with the Apple Pencil, as well as widgets and some other fun little things that are included in there. And it should be supported probably for another 3 years, as Apple supports about 5 to 6 updates for their iOS devices. Here is our Geekbench score for the iPad 6th generation. So we do have a 771 on the single core and 1425 multi-core. And as you can see by the specs here, we do have the A10 Fusion at 2.32 gigahertz with 1.93 gigs showing of memory. Of course, it's 2 gigs of RAM there. Now, if you compare this to the 7th generation, it literally has just about the same exact score. So you shouldn't see much of a difference between performance on the 6th and 7th generation, other than with memory intensive tasks or with multitasking. Now we'll just do a quick social media test on here. So we'll test out a couple of apps as well as one game here. So we'll start out with Twitter. So as you can see, that loads up pretty quickly there. We're going to go to the top right there. We can see scrolling is pretty smooth. Photos do take a minute to load up there, but everything's overall is pretty smooth. Opening up a new tweet here. Going to our search right here. Takes just a second. Going between the tabs takes just a second there. But as you can see, overall pretty smooth. And if we want to go to Instagram next, that one does have just an iPhone app, so it shouldn't be too graphically intensive. As you can see, that loads up pretty quickly as well. Scrolling through here is nice and smooth as well. Does take a second to load everything up here. If we want to go to the camera right there, that loads up pretty quickly. So you can use this for the camera if you want to. All right, next we'll test out TikTok here, and I do have the volume down so I don't get a copyright strike for any of these songs that pop up here. So as you can see, that pops up pretty quickly. Feel a little bit of a stutter with these when you're going through, but for the most part, it's pretty good. So we can check our notifications here, check our own profile right here, go back. Everything is still pretty good there. All right, lastly, we'll just open up a game here. So we'll just open up Among Us, and I'm not gonna go into a game or anything like that. We'll just open it up just to see how fast it loads here. All right, so as you can see, it didn't take too long to load up there, so we can go into our settings or go into these little things right here. Everything pops up pretty quickly, so not too bad. All right, and just to give you a quick speaker test on this, so it does have just these bottom firing speakers down here, so it's not a complete stereo experience, but here is a quick test. So speakers on this are decent, however I did notice that comparing the 7th generation iPad to the 6th generation, the 7th did have louder speakers on it. So if you are looking for louder speakers, this one might be the one to go for. So our display on this iPad is a 9.7-inch display. It does have a pretty high resolution, and as you can see by this sample clip here, it does have really nice vibrant colors as well as a good contrast ratio and pretty good blacks here. It is an LED IPS display, so of course it is going to look really nice. It does have good viewing angles as well. So one thing that is different between this one and higher-end iPads is this does have a non-laminated display. So what that basically means is that the glass is on top and then the display is underneath, and there is a gap between them. So if you were to get a higher end iPad, those will be fused and you'll have a laminated display, which does result in a higher quality or a better looking display. Now, one perk of having a non-laminated display is if, say for instance, you do drop your iPad and damage the glass, or something happens and it does get damaged, you will only have to replace the glass on this, most likely, because the display underneath should probably still be fine. So that will equal lower cost repairs. So if you did buy this iPad and something did, God forbid, happen, it won't cost you an arm and a leg to replace. So the iPad does have a 1.2 megapixel camera on the front and an 8 megapixel camera on the back. And it does 1080p HD video recording. It's, of course, not going to be the greatest, but it's there if you need to use it. Anyway, so here's a couple samples from both of these cameras just to give you an idea of what you're going to get with the 6th generation iPad. And here's a quick sample of the rear camera on the iPad 6th generation. So it's not a great day, not very sunny or anything. It's pretty overcast, but hopefully this gives you an idea of the quality of the camera. And here's a quick test of the front-facing camera on the iPad 6th generation. So it's not bad, it's not great. Overcast day, so probably not going to be the best. So is the iPad 6th generation worth it in 2021? I'd say yes and no, and the reason I say that is because it depends on the price that you pay for this. So on Swappa currently, a Wi-Fi 32 gig model, the lowest price is $240. Which is very, very close to the lowest price of a 7th generation with a Wi-Fi 32 gig. And that one is $275 at its lowest, so that's pretty close in price. And then if you think about it, it's $329 for the 8th generation, so you may as well just go for the brand new one if you're gonna spend all this money anyway. So if you're going for the Wi-Fi and cellular model, that one is $260 at its lowest, so that I would recommend, yes, because that is a decent price. So if you are going to go for the 6th generation, go for a Wi-Fi and cellular model or a higher capacity 128 gig model for a good price. Of course, I would recommend you price shop for those, because if the 7th generation is close in price to the price that you're going to pay for the 6th generation, just go to the 7th generation. And of course, if the 8th generation goes on sale and you can find that for a good price, go for that. So it really just depends on the price of this. They do retain their value, which is good, but it's also bad because you can't really find great deals on them unless you go for these different models of the iPad here. So it's really your call. But as far as this video, the Display on this is still really good. The battery life on this is still really good. It of course is going to have a couple more iPad OS updates on here, and it is still a pretty good performer. Now if you need something for video editing and photo editing, this might not be the one to go for. I'd probably go for the 8th generation iPad or one of the higher end iPads. But for basic media consumption, web browsing, social media, that kind of stuff, this thing is going to be great. And of course, it'll be great for a kid if you want to get a tablet for your kids. Anyway guys, so this has just been a quick video on the iPad 6th generation in 2021. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, hit that like button. If you want to see more like this, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video.